Thank you for joining me today, Carl. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, super excited to have it, Phil. Thank you.
And before we start, I just want to say I love the idea of doing things to for financial conversations. I think I told you in the past, like your podcast, The 50 Fires, I played
Mm.
some of those in the car with my wife, and it's
Mm.
really made for some good conversations. And I think that this book can do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of settled into the idea that that's what my work is now about. It's not about sketches, it's not about books, it's not about podcasts, it's about conversations, right? And all of those sort of serve to help us have more of them in the world.
Yeah, and we just don't have enough. And so I think it's really
It's
great.
true. It's true.
And it's a really great process when you have those conversations. You learn so much.
Yeah, and it's often hard and challenging. So that's we gotta kind of stick with it. Give
Yes.
ourselves permission to be clumsy. Don't tap out. I almost tapped out of a conversation we were having as a family around money this last week. And it was the hardest thing I could do, to stay in the conversation and not be offended and not feel guilty or not be defensive. And I'm actually really proud of myself that I was able to stay in it and not tap out, because they're hard, but it's the only way. I think a really good relationship with money happens in conversation, right? So we need to have them.
Yeah, I know I had one. I have, I'm a registered life planner, and I have my life plan, and there's an element of our life plan, which is to create a scholarship for when we go back to school later in life. And every year, at the end of the year, like in December, we have this conversation about where are we going to make donations to this year that we haven't yet. And at the end of last year, it happened for the second time, and my wife never mentioned the scholarship. And it was bothering me, And then we were away together in February, and it was my birthday, and I said, this is the time I'm going to bring this up. And I brought it up, and she hadn't realized it hadn't connected. And then when we had the conversation, now it's okay, and she gets it. But we sometimes we just sit with those thoughts inside our head and never do anything about them.
Yeah, I think that's particularly interesting around money, just because at its core, it is just zeros and ones stored in a cloud. But what we tend to do, and what you're pointing to, is we build up all these big stories around things, and in the absence of information, we will certainly create a narrative. And money is nothing more than zeros and ones with a giant pile of stories on top of them, right? And I think it turns out, your wife may just not have thought about it. It slipped her mind, and it was no less important. I know I can tell these stories about they just don't care. I can't believe, don't they see how hard that I work and how important this is to me? And in absence of conversation, we'll continue to believe that story. And so interesting, once we bring it up, sometimes we may find out a difficult truth, but often we find out, especially if we bring it up in the right way, somebody says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize that," there's immediate, if we can bring it up in the right way, there's often immediate empathy. If we can create empathy, then suddenly everything in the room changes. Instead of being defensive, we're saying things like, "Oh, how can I be helpful?" So yeah, I love that.
Thanks. And so I want to now turn to some of the sketches and chapters in your book that I really related to, and talk to them a little bit more. So the first one is just the idea of real financial planning. And I'd like you to talk about that, and I'll ask you a couple questions.
Sure. Yeah, there's so for your viewers and listeners, there's this, think of it as a Venn diagram. It's two circles with a little bit of an overlap. And the circles are labeled your money, and one of the other circles labeled your life, and the overlap is real financial planning. And sometimes your money, there's a phrase, your money or your life. And sometimes it's seen as a choice. In fact, there's a great book, I think one of the best books ever written about personal finance, by that title, Your Money or Your Life. And again, I want to emphasize, I think one of the best books ever written about personal finance. The only thing I ever sort of it just it sort of bothered me for, well, at this point, it would be 2 decades, the word or. And there was good reasons for it. And I agree with the reasons. And again, like the book is probably the best book I've ever read about personal finance. But I think there's an integration of the two, not a fight between the two. Like not a choice. You choose your money or your life. In addition to the conversation about or, I think there's a really beautiful conversation to have around and, your money and your life. And I think that's where real financial planning happens, is the integration of money, the integration of the use of money. And maybe even a word I like a lot is alignment, or your alignment of your use of capital with what you say is important to you. Right? To me, that's the never-ending process. Like refining that is the never-ending process of real financial planning.
Oh, absolutely. And like how you use your capital is so representative that I was exchanging emails with my sister this morning, and she's divorced, and she was telling me about a decision her ex made and what that meant. And I'm like, well, by his actions, right? That shows what's important to him, because it was related to his relationship with the kids and some concerns that she had. I'm like, well, he's showing what he thinks is most important, because this is how he's decided to act.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, right? Like, what you're pointing to is revealed preferences say a lot more than stated preferences.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can be very sincere and intentional about our stated preference. Like for me, it's, more time with my family, mainly outside. That's my stated preference. And honestly, I think almost anybody who knows me well, if you ask them what's important to Carl, they would tell you time with his family, mainly outside. But if I look at my time, maybe I missed one of my long walks in the mountains, and I'm like, I just didn't have time this week. And then I go look at my screen time and I see I spent 3 hours on ESPN. Well, apparently ESPN's more important, or at least it was that week, than the time in the mountains. And I would argue that's just because I was no less sincere about time. It was just I made a series of choices that led there to be a misalignment of my use of capital time with what's actually important to me. And when I get that pointed out, I can now make some corrections. So it's not that, I would hope it's not that I know for me at least, it's not that I'm any less sincere or mean it any less when I say time with my family. Even if my actions don't show that, I don't mean it any less. It's just called being human. And the solution to getting more alignment is just practice, continual practice. Like, okay, I'm off track, I'm going to practice. So I think that's the way I think of that sort of issue of aligning our use of money, energy, time, and attention, the 4 sources of capital, which is another essay in the book, with what's really important to you.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that one too, because that one stuck out to me as well.
Yeah.
But before we do that, what would you say is the most harmful myth about financial planning, and how would you reframe that in plain English?
I think the most harmful myth is that I think myth's probably still the right word. I think perception at the very least is that two is one, that it's a one-time event, right? That you go do financial plan. And the truth is that it's a never-ending process that you engage in. So there's a difference between a financial plan and financial planning, the ongoing process. And the second thing I think the financial services industry, speaking really broadly, and even the financial planning profession sometimes, just sort of by mistake almost, we can give people the perception that a financial plan is about delivering certainty. That this 2-inch thick book will tell you what the next 30 years of your life is going to look like. And the reality is, as much effort as we should put into that 2-inch thick book, or even like the 30-year line that's in the chart, we want to make that the best line we possibly can. And then we have to hold a competing truth in our minds at the same time, which is, and it will be wrong. All models are wrong. Let's just make sure this one's useful.
Right.
Just like a flight plan with a commercial pilot. They do detailed flight plans despite the fact that they know the flight will never go exactly according to the plan. So I think those both point to the same thing, which is this is a never-ending process, not an event.
Yeah, I know. I like to tell people that almost as soon as your plan is done, we know it's not going to be right, because not everything's going to work out the way. And that's why the way that you plan, and that's why we want to go back and revisit it and course correct along the way.
For sure.
The next one I'd like to go to is the 4 sources of capital, which I know you just mentioned. And so I've rearranged those. I use team because I like to think that we have a team of capital.
Nice.
But I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
That's great. I have no problem. But just to go over them, so money, energy, time, and attention, or in your case, time, energy, attention, money, both are great. Let's just talk real quickly about attention, because I think that's kind of fun. Like, money seems like it's obvious because we talk about it so much, and I think time's really interesting. Like, one of the fun thought experiments with money and time is, what if somebody asked me this, like, what if we treated money like it had the same characteristics as time? Meaning, like, you couldn't save it up, you can't store it. Like, at the end of the day, that time's gone. And I'm not sure it's the best financial planning practice, but it's an interesting thought experiment. Like, how would you treat your life differently? Because one day that will actually be true, right? You can't save it up. I mean, the Egyptians tried that, and all it got them was robbed. So I think that's interesting. And attention's really interesting to me too. Like, we have all this language around. I don't think we spend enough time talking and thinking about attention, because I would argue, at least culturally and commercially, the most valuable commodity on the planet right now is our collective attention, your individual attention. The richest people in the world, if we're just going to look at what society values, the richest people in the world are titans of attention. Facebook, Amazon, I think you can argue, Twitter in the old days, whatever it's called now, X. Those are all people who are battling for your attention. So if it's that valuable to them, in other words, it's made them the richest people in the world, it must have some value. Like, titans of it, it's no longer railroad titans, it's titans of attention. That's pretty wild to think about. So if we just start thinking that way, like, wait, this must be really valuable, I'm going to be a little bit more careful about how I allocate it. And then we have this phrase, pay attention. And I would argue that the currency, the way you pay for a good relationship, is with the currency of attention. Right? I think the way you buy a meaningful life is by paying attention to what you pay attention to. I just think it's fun to play around with attention. Apparently it's really, really valuable, and it's very hard to allocate.
That's a really interesting concept. I hadn't thought about attention quite in that way, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because when you think about, like, there's a question I'll sometimes ask that I got from my life planning training, that if I ask you how many hours in a day, you're going to tell me 24. And if I ask you how many hours they're going to be tomorrow, it's still 24. And a week from now, it's still going to be 24. But then the exercise becomes, if there's some type of cosmic event, and all of a sudden the Earth started to spin a little bit faster, and there are only 22 hours in the day instead of 24, what would you do? What changes would you make? And you can't tell me, oh, I'd sleep less, because that's really not going to do it. So you have to figure out what to cut out, and that what you're cutting out really ties into the idea of attention.
I agree. I think any exercise that helps us understand that attention actually is a source of capital that you get to spend and invest, it gets a return. And I actually would argue that it's the most, apparently, it's maybe the most valuable source of capital we have.
Social media companies would certainly argue that, right?
Yeah, and I think too, just when you start to realize like you can certainly spend time with one of your children. That is a completely different experience. That kid will have you and that child will have a completely different experience if you also spend attention during that time. And they will know the difference. They will know the difference. Time is one thing, and you could spend time, money, and energy. Like we're going to go on an experience. It's going to cost us money to ski. So we're going to be together. It's going to cost us money to ski, and it's going to take energy to go do it. And you could not even be there with your attention, and the whole experience could actually end up being a net negative experience, depending on your child's perspective. I mean, it could also be awesome that I got to ski all day and I didn't even have to talk to my dad. but there's a real tangible difference there, and I think we don't pay enough attention to attention as a source of capital.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the other one that I like to think about too, beyond it, is the idea that we can use our money to buy back time. And that's another really important aspect of that to me.
Yeah, we can use our money to have more energy.
That too.
We could probably use our money to get better at attention. I know that's true for me. Like the most important thing I do right now is my sort of attention practice. I more commonly refer to it as my presence practice. Mm-hmm. And I can get coaching on that, and I can go to retreats on that to develop the ability to be more attentive to what I'm paying attention to. I can use my money and my time and my energy to get better at that. So I agree. You can flip any of those around.
Yeah. I'd like to move on to the next one, which was the one-page plan. And so if we think about that, and I know it's something I give to clients as well, what must you fit on that one page, and what do you leave off on purpose?
That's a really nice question. I like the way you frame that. I think a one-page plan should be done, at least metaphorically, with a Sharpie and cardstock. And the Sharpie, I think, is just a metaphor for a blunt instrument. Like it's not a 0.5 lead pencil that you could write a million words. You have some constraints on and as you pointed to, what would you leave off? I mean, the intent behind the one-page plan for me, and again, my work is largely just an adventure journal. It's not necessarily meant to be self-help or prescriptive in any way. It's meant to just provide a journal of a fellow traveler. For me, the purpose of one-page plan was to remind me of what was really important, to remind me of the purpose. You could use Simon Sinek's work around like start with why. You could think about it as a personal money mission statement. Any language is fine. So I think the most important thing is the top sentence or two. For me, the most important thing has been the top sentence or two, which I often refer to as a statement of financial purpose. And for me, mine says time with my family, mainly outside, and service in my community. Some other examples would be my friend Jerry, who was sort of Tom Brokaw's greatest generation, a veteran. And, Jerry wasn't the kind of person that was going to cry in your office when you asked him about money. But when we asked Jerry about this, he said, was very thoughtful about it. And he said, I never want to be a burden to the kids. And so on the top of his one-page plan, I never want to be a burden to the kids. And I'd like to spend more time with my grandkids and serve in the community if there was money left over, right? If there was time or energy, capital left over. So I think that's the first part of a one-page plan is like just a reminder, a simple sentence or two that can act as a touchstone. It can, like the reason this is important is you have to have something to self-correct to, right? And the very first place, like when you're feeling scared about money, like it could be the markets are scary. It could be you lost your job. It could be like you didn't get the inheritance you'd planned on. Like whatever it is, I kind of metaphorically think of us as being way out in the branches of a tree, and there's a windstorm, and the branches they're moving a lot when you're way out in the branches. But if you can get yourself back to the trunk It's probably not moving at all, especially down near the roots. It's actually not moving at all down near the roots. And I think that what we're putting at the top of a one-page plan is the roots of the issue. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, no matter what's going on in the scary markets, time with my family mainly outside, can I still do? Okay, great. Then I can start moving up a little bit. And the next part of a one-page plan would be a statement of maybe your most important goals. And again, I use that word carefully. Those goals will be informed by the statement of purpose. For Jerry, never want to be a burden to the kids. Okay, let's put some framework around that. What would you need to have in order to never be a burden to the kids? And we'll call those goals. Want to spend time with the grandkids? How much do they cost? I mean, I remember Jerry specifically said, I would like $10,000 a year that I don't even have to think about. I can do anything I want with the grandkids. Okay, well, that's a nice goal, right? $10,000 a year. So you may have a list of goals, and I always think of ranking those goals in order of importance. Mm-hmm. Like, what's your priority, order of importance? And then the last part of a one-page plan, to me, it's a living, breathing document, is like, what are you going to do next? Like early on, I think of those as like next 90 days. Sometimes they could be next week. Sometimes they could be this year, depending on how mature your planning is. Like, you may have a bunch of stuff kind of nailed down in the early days of a financial plan. There's a lot of work to do. And it could be like, next 90 days, we're going to get these 10 things done. And it could eventually be like, okay, what's our focus this year? So it's statement of financial purpose, a statement of next level, like the purpose. From the purpose flows this thing we call goals. I don't love that word, but I don't think we have a better. You could use intentions, right? Like whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then what are you going to do next? That to me is my version of a one-page plan. I've seen lots of versions. They're all amazing. That's my version.
I like that. And I know that when I work on somebody's life plan with them, like that's where I look to get that purpose out of there. And that's what I start with too, because I think it is so important because it does help keep you focused.
Yeah. Whenever I'm feeling a little scared or nervous, which is often, like about maybe a business project or an investment we made, or I'll just return back. Oh yeah, that's right. Am I spending enough time with my family mainly outside? Yeah, I am. Or maybe like right now, I feel like I'm in a slight period of planned imbalance around that. And I can know that by returning and going, I'm not quite getting the time outside I want, especially with our new hunting dog. It's fall. I should be spending more time. Oh yeah, that's right. You're intentionally doing this. So it's a planned imbalance. Okay, fine. I don't know that it's ever about resolving the tension. I'm in balance. That's what I used to think it was about. And we're all smart enough now to know that's a myth. It's just always about the sort of the practice of modulating between them in a healthy way, in a very intentional way, and reminding yourself of why. And you may wake up and go, oh my gosh, how did I get so far off track? Mm-hmm. I know that happens to me. And then I'm like, oh, okay. It might take a couple weeks to get the ship righted, but at least now I know I'm headed back,
Exactly. I'd like to go revisit the word goals, because you have one in there called goals or guesses. And I know I agree. I've written a blog on that too. So I'd love to hear you talk about the idea of like reframing goals as evolving possibilities.
Yeah, I love that. Possibilities are really nice. What I'm trying to point at there is the word goal has become so loaded. There's that Harvard study. I know I should have goals. The Harvard study turns out didn't even exist, which is really funny. But I know I should have goals. All smart people, all successful people have goals. But I noticed over the last 25 years of asking clients, like literally maybe like the first question back in the old days could have been like, what are your goals? Anytime you ask, I'd ask your listeners to just think about like, how does that feel when you're like, what are your goals? And I feel it, the base of my, like between my shoulder blades, at the base of my neck and a little bit of my chest, sort of like pressure and like tension. And there's also this sense of like, I got to get it right. And the goals or guesses is just an effort to make it more playful. Like, we don't really know anyway. All goals are just guesses. Like, some of them, sometimes we have to convince ourselves that they're really, really important. And sometimes we call those strong opinions, loosely held. But we can't tell one half of our brain can't know about the loosely held part. Because like we got to be so focused on meeting the goals. But in the back of our mind, we're like, hey, by the way, you're allowed to change them. And so that's all I'm saying. Like, let's make it a little more playful. Goals are it's just a guess. Relax. Guess for me. Like, what do you think you'd like to be doing in 10 years? Oh, okay, cool. And then that acts as sort of like a stake in the ground. We can kind of head that direction. Because I promise you, we'll get new information tomorrow or next week or next year that you'll be like, you know what? I thought I'd really like sailing. I went sailing. I don't like it. Right? Like that's just meant to be a suggestion to the mind to relax a bit.
When you say that, it reminds me of when you had Gretchen Rubin on your podcast and she told the story about skiing.
It's so good. Yeah, I'll just, for your listeners, recap it real quick. She was at a cocktail party, a dinner party, something, and they had either just come or they were just headed to, I can't remember. Can you remember?
They were headed.
I think they were just headed out to Colorado or probably Colorado, not Utah, because the skiing's terrible in Utah. Don't come to Utah. It's just sort of a joke. But they were headed to Colorado, and somebody else, she mentioned that to somebody at the party, and the other person was like, "Oh, do you ski?" And Gretchen was like, "No," and she's pretty sure of it, right? Like, no, we don't ski. We've decided, my husband and we do not ski. We just like going to the mountains in the winter. And the other person was like, "You've got to ski. It's so fun," and took like a few minutes to try and convince her about skiing. Gretchen was like, "No, we don't ski." And the lady left. She came back 15, 20 minutes later or something and said, "You know what? I don't like skiing either. I just have been doing it because that's what you do." And I think that was such a great, kudos to both of them, right? Especially the lady that came back. I love that Gretchen was so sure of just, "No, we don't like it. Thank you for the suggestion." But I love that the lady came back and was like, "Wait." And I think what we're saying by goals equals guesses, we're giving you permission to be okay with being like, "Wait, that's just something my dad told me to do," or "This is my sister-in-law's goal," or "I read about it on Instagram. I don't even like it. I don't even like it." We had a friendship recently where we realized, and this applies to friendships, it's okay for you to wake up one day and go, "I don't really even enjoy spending time with that person." Right? And turns out they probably might not even enjoy spending time with me. It's okay to make changes and evolve and change. So goals equals guesses. Goals equals.
I love that. I love that. And as you're saying it, I'm thinking about the fact, one of the things I've told my kids, and if I look at my career, this really applies, is the idea that don't go through life with these blinders on, that you're just looking down this narrow path, because there may be something way out to the side that you're only going to see because you didn't have those blinders blocking your vision. It's like, when I look at my career, it's made so many changes and I'm finally doing the thing that I like, but it never would have happened if I had always had like this narrow pathway and this is the only way to go.
Everything you're saying, Phil, is really interesting. This whole conversation just reminds me of all the tension. And there's an essay in the book called "When Values Collide" that I'm sort of really proud of, just because it's pointing to this idea, like there is a time to just lock the blinders on, right? Burn the ships, they say, like burn the boats. Get rid of all the options. And boy, stick your head up every once in a while and look around. And maybe there's whole chunks of your life. Like I would suggest that college is one of those chunks. Early dating is one of those chunks where you should get as many variable reps as you can. Maybe the sport you want to participate in when you're 10, 11, 12. Like I think some of the best parenting advice I ever got was like, sign him up for lots of different things. Mm-hmm. Right? So there are times that I think we're intentionally supposed to be exposed to a lot of things. Then there's other times when we want to lock down. I love this. I'm going to lock down. Awesome. Then remember, it's going to probably come up again. So I love this tension between competing variables, competing values, because the truth is we're not trying to resolve that tension. A rich life is made because of that tension with plenty of periods of rest, right?
Yeah. For the last one, I'm going to take us in a little bit different direction.
Sure.
And that's the one about tax planning, not reporting, which is something I talk about with people a lot. And maybe it's partly because of where I came from, but I know how important it is. Just this idea that we get to the end of we don't want to even think about taxes till we start to get this mail in February that has the 1099s and all these things for filing. And then we're like, what can I do? Well, it's too late.
That's just a simple bar graph for people listening that says the taxes you paid, and it's a big bar. And there's a shorter bar that says the taxes you could have paid, and the difference is called tax planning. And again, I want to be clear, like I'm not talking about like I've told my CPA that I want to be, if there was like a 1 to 10 scale on aggressiveness about how I'm going to treat my taxes, I want to be a 1. Like I want to be but I certainly don't want to miss out on things that are clearly spelled out. Like, are you tracking your mileage when you drive for specific work things, right? Like, are you like whatever, there are very specific things that are completely okay within the tax code. In fact, they're meant to be used. They're there to be used. Well, you're pointing to a real challenge. Again, deep empathy for the best CPAs in the world. Even the best CPAs in the world, because of the pressure of their job, often don't have time to be strategic. They're going to be really good at reporting on what has already happened. That's their job. Now, there are some really good ones that have built their businesses around the idea that they're going to be strategic. But largely, that's a challenge. And so I think we need to be just more thoughtful. A good financial advisor can do that if they've got expertise like you do. And I don't know if I would use the word should, but a good financial advisor can do that. That would be one place that they would be really valuable. But just the idea of like, could you just simply set aside 90 minutes every quarter personally to ask questions of ChatGPT, to ask questions of your financial advisors, to ask questions of your CPA, like, hey, what should I be thinking about? Anything here? Could we run an estimate? I know I have an estimate run every quarter, and stuff comes up every year in mid-year where we're like, hey, we should be thinking about this. So yeah, I think that's a smart one to end on.
And just one last question about that. I mean, can you talk about any kind of mindset shifts that you see when people start to see taxes as this year-round thing instead of just April paperwork?
I think, I don't know about mindset shift, but I can certainly point to the feeling. It's such a better feeling to feel like I'm on top of this. I've thought about it and there's no surprises. There was actually a mistake made last year, and it was a good mistake, right? Like I made more money than we thought I would make, but it resulted in a pretty surprising tax bill because there was something missed, and my CPA actually totally owned it and was like, I can't believe I blew that. That's completely my fault. It didn't result, like I didn't pay more than I should have. I just didn't know it, and I didn't like that feeling. Right. So that's just even one example of, there was no mistake even made. I didn't pay more. There was nothing we could have done differently, probably. I just didn't know. And it resulted in me having to have a surprise. And the surprise was accompanied with, guess what? You earned way more than you thought. Well, that's great. But I didn't like that feeling. It's a much better feeling to be like, no surprises. We're on it. Is there anything, I love the idea of being able to say, is there anything we haven't thought of, and largely be able to say, I don't think there is. I think there is. So the feeling, I think, is really important. And I think that does result in a mindset shift too.
I agree. And so I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you so much for your time and for this book. And I'd love you to just tell people where they can find more about it.
And thanks, Phil. It was a very thoughtful conversation. So the book is called Your Money, Reimagining Wealth Through 101 Simple Sketches. You can find it anywhere books are sold. My favorite suggestion is, and it's really interesting, and this is sort of like really inside baseball, but unless you know it, you don't realize how important pre-sales are to people, to the success of the book. So I've been suggesting to people, buy one copy from Amazon and order one from your favorite local bookstore. If you do both of those things, it'll help get the book in more hands, and I think you'll really, really love it. Everything about it was meant to spark these kind of conversations. And so there's, whatever we covered, let's say 6, there's 95 more for you in the book.
I know how to recommend it, having read. It's an easy read. It's quick and it makes you think. And like we've shown here, it can lead to really good conversation. So I'd like to thank you just for writing it. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.